satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.
Satellite Haiku, welcome everyone. I'm Milo.
I'm Sean. So we were just talking about psychedelics. So this guy, Jules Evans, that I follow, he has a recent piece. I think it was him. He has a recent piece about how common it is for people who have like profound experiences with psychedelics to decide that they're being called to basically be shaman, to lead ceremonies. And I wonder what kind of, it feels like there's a certain kind of person, maybe an entrepreneurial person like the guy you were just talking about, like that kind of person in particular who, upon having a profound experience with MDMA or ayahuasca or whatever, decides like, I'm a shaman now and I need to lead a circle. Because they're just kind of a leader mentality anyway.
Yeah, no, it's true. In this case, there was certainly a motivation around seeing sort of a global sense of despair and kind of deer in the headlights lack of action in terms of climate change and politics. And this idea
but instead of pointing people to like, here's the people out there practicing, like get in touch with these, I need to be one of the shaman now. There's sort of an ego thing.
Yeah, no, it'd be interesting to inquire into that. I mean, I think I'm certainly open enough with my friend that we could look at that as an aspect.
I would. I'm not saying him in particular, but I just think like it is interesting because I have seen that too in my own psychedelic circles. Like the people who come and they have one or two really profound experiences are the ones most susceptible to thinking, "Oh, I need to be a teacher now." It's like, well, you've done it twice.
No, but it's funny because I always so I was involved, as you know, with like a yoga community. I taught yoga for I think 27 years, different types of yoga, right? And I never had a guru. I certainly was guru adjacent, like I was with groups that were following this guru. And one thing I never understood was early on they would have teacher trainings, and like 35 people would show up in the Tucson community for the teacher training. Mm-hmm. And I would say to the friend who I knew, I was like, so do you want to teach yoga? And they go, no, I just, whoa, dude, there's this really trippy, there's like this pink blobs forming on your screen. I could take a picture. I can't really.
Okay.
Yeah. There's like one on your beard, and then two just randomly end up in the corner. There's a bunch of
it's the MDMA, man. It's kicking in.
It's kicking in. Anyway, no, it's pretty. It's trippy in like a robot way, like or like I'm discovering that we're actually
we're in that simulation.
The simulation, right? But back to this idea. So saying to
the yoga teachers,
the yoga teacher, and I would say like, so you want to be a teacher? And they're like, no. I just wanted to go deeper and learn more about the practice, but there isn't really like a pathway to do that. Like they hadn't really created immersions or intensives yet. So they only really had a teacher training path. And if you wanted to learn more, you had to be,
that makes sense. I mean, because I think about something like meditation, right? Like if you were really into meditation, there's retreats you can go on. You can do a 5-day silent retreat or a 7-day intensive meditate. There's lots of those at different meditation centers. But if those didn't exist, I could see that people would look around for, kind of what's the next sort of place, what's the next stepping stone on this deep meditation path. Not necessarily wanting to be teachers, but if that was what was out there and there was no, retreats and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I feel like I always kind of, I don't know where I got this from, but I always kind of pull back and have this big picture view. Like maybe it's because my dad was a history professor. So like I kind of look at the idea of religion as a construct, as we talked about this last time a little bit, as when people feel uncertain about their present conditions or the present state or the future, they make up a myth that could maybe explain what's happening or what
Right.
will
Filling
happen.
the gaps with God, so to speak.
Yeah, like if you're afraid of dying, you might say there's a heaven, and
Right. Uncertainty itself feels so uncomfortable to people.
exactly, just being uncertain. And so it seemed like human beings have this ability, and it's like a universal thing. Like, you go to the Museum of the Musical Instrument, and that there's that thread through across like time zones, geography, cultural things. Everyone likes adorning themselves. They like rhythm and melody and dancing. It's like that seems to be like a lowest common denominator, thing that weaves its way through humanity.
Yeah.
I think that the urge to find, like, for instance, becoming a devout something is similar to being a seeker and trying ayahuasca or trying a house, because you're looking for like behind the veil. Like there seems like there's this secret construct of the universe that we can't quite, you had said last time about dark matter. Like it's like
It seems like, though, there's two different mindsets. There's like the people that are trying to resolve uncertainty, and that's one of the maybe the mechanisms or the pathways they try to follow. It's like, if I lift the veil, I'll find the answers, right? Like that's fundamentally what you're describing sounds like and probably is for a lot of people, because again, uncertainty feels uncomfortable, but it's this sort of, the goal is to answer the big questions, right? But I think there's another mindset that other people have, which is, I'm just really love exploring. Like, I like finding more questions. And I like the whole process of asking questions and exploring questions and investigating for its own sake, almost like to expand the question universe rather than to close it and find and narrow in on answers. And I wonder whether those are fundamentally sort of distinct human. I sort of feel like, there's two different kinds of people. There's people that really seek out answers and need closure and need answers and are really uncomfortable with uncertainty. And I'm the exact opposite. Like, I am more comfortable with uncertainty than certainty. Like, certainty itself makes me uncomfortable. It's sort of like it's a version of being afraid of commitment, in a way. Like, I don't
clarify,
like,
when you say certainty itself, is it the fact that that something is, we've decided that something is as it is, so, and there is no more questions about it. So it's like,
signals a kind of, in people, when I encounter it in people, it signals a kind of closed offness, like a lack of curiosity, a closed mind. And, I wrote about this recently. It's sort of, I feel like the people who are, mobs are, you can't be part of a mob unless you're feeling really certain about your righteousness, right? That kind of thing. Like, there's a certain kind of moral righteousness or righteous certainty, zealotry that makes me super uncomfortable. So I feel like I sort of see the slippery slope, or I feel the slippery slope with certainty. Yeah, when people are just claiming certainty about things. And maybe it's that religious upbringing, like this idea that, making sort of these belief statements about God and whatever. And I remember way back early days feeling kind of uncomfortable saying those things. Like, I'm saying I believe this and I believe that, and I'm sort of professing these beliefs, but I don't feel those beliefs. And it felt like that disconnect felt really weird to me, even back in my younger days. Like, how would we even know this stuff? And it's funny because my daughter asks the same kinds of questions. She'll ask really interesting, probing questions about heaven. And she goes to Catholic school, right? And they have confirmation in a few years, 8th grade, I think. And she's telling me lately, I don't think I'm going to agree to confirmation when it's my turn.
Wow.
Because I just I don't feel like I can say I know those things. That's, like, I hear you, girl. That's exactly how I felt.
So mature, though. Wow.
Yeah.
And it's so unusual because so many kids that age don't want to be different, or they just want to go along with the pack and kind of keep their head down. So imagine her literally saying, well, I'm not going to confirm things I don't believe yet. So
yeah.
Why would I? Because isn't that the idea of, I don't know, I wasn't raised Catholic, but confirmation means you're like saying, I believe that Jesus Christ was the
I think
Son
we
of God.
had it in our church, and I didn't do it, but I think we had it for, I think when you were 18 or 21 or something, it was something around that age where you were allowed to be confirmed. I wasn't ever confirmed, but
I was never confirmed.
In the Catholic Church, it's 8th grade is your first opportunity. And it's interesting because they do say, like the priest, I've heard priests recently talking about confirmation. Is Dylan, my son's turn is next year. And they do say, like, you don't have to, it's a private conversation between, you're not up in front of a congregation declaring it to the congregation in front of the community what your answer is. Like, it's a private matter between you and the parish priest when it's confirmation time. Like your confirmation ceremony is a kind of a private one-on-one. It might be in front of a congregation, I'm not sure, but like they're not hearing what you're saying. So you have the option to kind of defer or refuse. Yeah.
And when they say first Holy Communion, is that after you're confirmed?
No. So the Catholic Church has communion. First communion was 2nd grade, I think.
Oh, way before that.
They have communion, they have reconciliation, which is confession, right? So that's one of the first, these sacraments. There's baptism, that's the first one, right? Then there's communion, that I think is 2nd grade. That's when my kids did their communion, first communion. And then there's reconciliation. I can't remember if that's before or after communion, but that's your first confession. That's a weird one where I remember going to that for my kids, and they would, they had 3 or 4 priests in the church at that time because there's a lot of kids going through their first confession. And so the kids are called up one by one to go to one of the priests that's there and confess something. And it's totally private. Like, they're not supposed to talk to you afterward, their parents afterwards about what they said to the priest. It's totally, reinforced that this is private. Like, the priest won't tell anyone what you shared with them, and you don't have to tell anyone. In fact, you're encouraged not to share it, really, in a way. So it's interesting. And then, confirmation's 8th grade. Yeah.
I remember my friends in public school who were Catholic would come and tell me, they'd say, "Oh man, after confession, like the priest wrote, said, oh, you're gonna have to do 500 Hail Marys and
the penance,
Our Fathers, and like all basically all these sort of things.
Yeah.
And the worse the crime, the more the time. Like it was.
Yeah. Well, there's a movie. I think it's Kevin Dillon is the actor. I can't remember the movie, but he's in line. It's boys at a Catholic school, and they're in line for confession, and he's going through each of their lists. He's saying, what are you going to confess? And they're telling him what they're going to confess. He said, no, whoa, that's way too much. You're going to get killed for that. Like, you're going to get crushed with so many Hail Marys or whatever. So what you do is let's dial that down to, you had impure thoughts twice, not 16 times, just twice. And we're going to say you lied. We're just going to add one lie. That'll be, because you're lying in confession. So we're just going to dial it way down, and we're just going to add one lie, and you'll be good. All right. So
I see. And that covers the one that,
Yeah, the confession lie. So he was helping his buddies like renegotiate their confession lists.
So
pretty smart.
Yeah, it was totally smart. I had a thought this morning, I think when I woke up really early, that was about, so remember, my understanding, or at least what I learned in school in history class, was that the Catholic Church devolved to a place right before Martin Luther nailed his manifesto on the door of the church, devolved to a place where you could buy what were called indulgences. So you could pay ahead of time for a sin.
Yeah.
Like if I wanted, I was a merchant and I was really wanted to murder my competitor, I could literally go and be like, here's $1 million to the church for a new wing on the monastery, and can I just kill him and not go to hell? And it got to that point where the church was literally dealing sins, you could deal.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that
it was a pretty good money-making idea for the church. It's a good revenue stream.
Really good revenue stream. But it feels like we've reached that in the political spectrum for the United States in terms of the arc of the history of its democracy, where you can literally, because I read that people can go and literally ask for a pardon, and they can pay for a pardon. They give money to a lobbyist.
It feels very pay to play right now, for sure.
Yeah, very pay to play. And someone said, a woman recently who used to run, because there was a White House office, a lawyer who would receive requests for pardons, and they had a checklist. You had to have served all your time, worked for 2 years without any additional crimes, and then you could they would funnel sort of a pardon request that met the criteria, they'd funnel it up to the White House, and then the president would decide, right?
And it's the same thing with tariffs too. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So this lawyer who was recently let go or fired, she was interviewed and she said, someone came to me with a list, and I said, none of these people fit the criteria. And they're like, no, just push it through. And they said, and would you add Mel Gibson? And she was like, what? Just add him? And he goes, yeah, just add him. Just add Mel Gibson. And so she was thinking like, we're at that. To me, I was like, we're at that point where like you could literally be like, Mel Gibson wants to kill his neighbor. You know what I mean?
So he gets a preemptive
so he
pardon.
Preemptive pardon, and then I don't mean he's going to kill his neighbor, but I meant like he's planning to do something wrong and illegal. Right. So then he asked for one, and now he's going to, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, and then like the pay to play thing extends to like the tariffs is what I was going to say with like and other regulation, because there was some right wing hostility towards Facebook, for example, and there were some threats to kind of rein in Facebook in certain ways that were friendly to the right. Which is interesting because there's a lot of left-wing kind of hostility towards Facebook as well, and there was. But, then famously, notoriously, Zuckerberg went to Mar-a-Lago, right, met with Donald Trump, and then that very day or the next day announced they were going to get rid of fact-checking, right?
Yeah, it was
right. So,
listening to him describe
that's such obvious pay-to-play, right? And then with the tariffs, there were these threats of tariffs on Chinese imports, right? And Tim Cook went to the White House, met with Trump, and very next day, Apple got these exemptions for the iPhone, right? So, I mean, it feels nakedly pay for play right now, and that's how Donald Trump, the quote unquote deal maker, operates. It's all about personal loyalties, personal kind of fealty, all that. Yeah.
So this occurred to me too this morning because I've been watching my 401k tank and stuff, and it felt like wow, this chaos agent can really reach deep without even like knowing who I am. He can cause trouble in my life just on a whim. And
but that's all from the Biden administration.
Right. No, so it occurred to me that like when in 2016, some of my PhD level coworkers who were scientists in the cancer realm voted for him. And I said, why? And they said, I just want to see what a businessman does. Like if we put a businessman in there. And I thought, okay, so we kind of all knew, I mean, I grew up in Philadelphia, you did. We knew that he was like multiple failures. We didn't know how deep it went, like that he lost all the money his dad gave him tax-free and then kept losing more and more and more. So and then think of like Trump steaks, Trump cigars, Trump University, like they all failed, right? So why would we put such a phenomenal business failure?
Why that particular businessman who only played a businessman on TV? Yeah. Like that's as close to a businessman as you literally could take the money he was given as a young guy from his parents, put it in like an S&P 500, index fund, and he would have made more money.
Yeah, he'd have $3 billion or something like that.
Yeah. Like crazy. You can't fail in real estate, and he managed to somehow.
Well, go bankrupt in real estate. He failed in multiple casinos. I mean, most people don't lose money. The house steals 78% of the dollar of everyone that walks in the door. So he
managed to lose money in businesses. It's like killing a cactus, right? It's like you say you can't kill a cactus. He's a dude who killed a cactus, metaphorically, right?
Right. And it wasn't from overwatering.
The other thing I've been thinking about this whole business thing. So I just wrote about this actually the other day because this whole idea that the government should run like a business, let's see what a businessman could do. What it says about those people who say that, who think that they want that, is they imagine themselves as shareholders, right? Like shareholders in this business, and they want the business to do well for its shareholders, right?
Yeah.
But when a business does well, makes decisions that, to do things for its shareholders, a lot of times that makes things way worse for the customers, right?
And the employees.
And the employees, right? So like when you call your cable company and you're on hold and they keep telling you, most answers can be found on our website, right? And you're like, fuck you, I wouldn't call you if I could find the answer on your website, right? This is a weird thing. And you're punching 0 and nothing's happening. That's that's Comcast doing really good stuff for its shareholders, but it sucks for everybody else, right? Like, so the thing about the government is we're not just we are shareholders. We want it to operate in a way that's efficient, that doesn't waste our money, that our tax money, but we're also customers. Like, we want the shit that it does for us. And so if you only think of yourself as a shareholder, you're going to screw yourself as a customer.
Right. That's true. Good point. Huh. I have a good, this is a plug. So I went for my annual physical in January. And thankfully, I have United Healthcare Arizona, which is a very large group of all the employees of every school and college in Arizona. Mm-hmm. It's a really big group, 100,000, more like 300,000 people or something. And so I go in, and I've been going to this doctor for 5 years or something. And I go in and I come back, and I get 2 bills, one from the lab. And it's not a lot of money. It's like, $46.31. And then from the doctor, I get one for $56.31. And I'm like, that's not a lot of money, but I just want to see like what's the calculation? Like
what's the line item? What are the line items
so I
here?
call,
How
I
much
log
is the
in,
insurance paying?
And the United Healthcare has a pretty snazzy website that just shows every charge and what they paid and what they determined what you would owe. And
Wasn't that part of the ACA, just as a quick digression, reveal all that?
That's a good question, and I think because I said I thought that all screening was meant to be covered.
No, but I mean to show you the true costs. I think that was part of the ACA.
That might have been part of it, but my point was that when I mentioned the ACA, the woman said, "Well, each state does it differently." So like maybe the ACA said you have to figure out a way to show them, and then Arizona was like, we're going to do this, and so each state kind of used.
Yeah, that makes sense. They wouldn't have dictated the exact way.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I'm in there, and I'm looking at the spreadsheet, and first of all, I said to the woman, I was pretty frustrated, and I was like, nothing personal. Please don't take it personally. In fact, if you could help me with your expertise, since you look at these spreadsheets all day long, if you could help me understand really what's actually happening, that would be a big help, right? She came onto my side, right? So I said, first of all, I'm looking at bills and their numbers do not match what's on your spreadsheet online at all. Like nothing. And so then I said, then she walked me through, my doctor had gone off of tier 1 and was now not a tier, but she's still in network, which no one told us.
Like that's sort of the coverage circle they're in or whatever?
Tier 1 was meant to be, they agreed for these lower rates, and then I had a $200 deductible with tier 1, $1,000 deductible for in-network, not tier 1. Turns out there's tier 2 and tier 3, but she couldn't. So anyway, long story short, she basically goes, so here's what happens is we send the explanation of benefits back to your doctor after the appointment, after it's been submitted. It takes about 6 weeks. Then they send back to us what they are sort of agreeing to, sort of like negotiating. Wait, so hold on. So here's where it gets funny. She goes,
this is the shit that makes me think like people who think the health insurance industry is like the right way to go. Sorry. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. There's more people that think like the whole idea of Obamacare.
There's so many
was
people in the
subsidized.
middle, and it goes. It's like the movie The Office, where there's the guy that his job, Milton, right? Like, what do you do? Well, I take this document and I take it to those people.
Wait, so I mean, so like there's a couple of crazy moments. So at one point she goes, so according to us, you've met your $200 deductible, even though your doctor's not in tier 1. So you would only have to pay for a specialist, like a copay. And I said, I don't see, where did I pay $200? Like, and she goes, well, we just applied what the costs were to your deductible. And if it turns out that you don't have to pay that, then we'll go back 6 months later and recalculate and make you pay for shit. And I was like, I said to her, I was like,
sounds super efficient, doesn't it?
I was like, you see, that's just absolutely out of control. Like, I was like, so I should expect to go and pay a copay, and then later they're going to send me a bill.
Later they reconcile it and go, oh wait, he still has some more on his deductible that he needs to cover.
That we didn't get the first time because we intentionally messed it up by putting the wrong numbers in. I was like, you're stuffing things in the cells on the spreadsheet that are wrong. and you know they're wrong. Why? And she was like,
Let's talk about psychedelics some more. Like,
yeah, no, that's good.
I was thinking about like, so like this idea. Remember back? It feels like back in the '60s when you heard about like Timothy Leary and what was the guy's name? McKenna? No.
Yeah, McKenna.
Terrence McKenna, right?
Terrence McKenna and Ram Dass and
all those guys, right? And they had this idea, this sort of notion that, everybody needed to drop acid basically, and that would wake up the world into this sort of spiritual new age, the age of Aquarius or whatever, right? And aren't you an Aquarius, by the way?
I am, yeah,
Yeah.
hardcore.
So, but then you look at like a lot of these like tech bros and stuff, they've done psychedelics. They go to Burning Man or whatever. And it's clear that like as a technology, if you think of psychedelics as a technology, just doing the technology, just taking the drugs, obviously doesn't wake you up into, some spiritual kind of, it doesn't cause a spiritual epiphany that makes you into a decent person all of a sudden. Like, you have Elon Musk saying that empathy is kind of the main cause of whatever. What did he say about empathy? Something about how empathy is like the biggest problem or the thing that's holding the world back, basically, kind of thing.
I hadn't heard him say that. It sounds
There's some
like
quote from some famous Elon Musk quote about this sort of against empathy. Anyway, it's been juxtaposed with the Hannah Arendt quote about empathy, which is like when empathy starts to become something that's broadly questioned, basically that's like one of the first stages of, full totalitarianism. I'll have to find the actual quote, but she has sort of a response to that. And I've been seeing the Elon quote and her quote juxtaposed a lot lately. But yeah, I mean, obviously psychedelics doesn't make you. So anyway, I think there's something else about, I think you have to have it in you already, and psychedelics has to sort of awaken something. And maybe it has to do with kind of there's the set and setting idea, right? Like doing it at Burning Man at a party is not the same thing as doing it ceremonially in a spiritual way with the right kind of leader and in the right setting. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe part of it is set and setting. Maybe part of it is just what's already in your heart is being kind of fueled or awakened or somehow enhanced by the psychedelics. I don't know.
When all of those kind of factors that lead into like how profound it is, how permanently shifting it might be to your psyche or your outlook, it occurs to me that intention is such a powerful kind of catalyst for that. Like if you reach a place, if I kind of think back to like I'm in a tribal hunter-gatherer scenario, and we've hit a wall where we need to know something or move the answer to some question that's beyond us. Mm-hmm. And just our day-to-day activities isn't going to provide us with an opportunity to kind of jump the groove of our getting stuck in the record player.
Or like Michael Pollan refers to it as shaking the snow globe. Like if you need to shake the snow globe kind of to like get out of your little rut. And there's other things that do that. Like if you travel to another country with a drastically different culture than what you're familiar with, like you're shaken out of so many of your sort of core assumptions about reality that it just causes you to learn really in a really profound way and see things clearly in a different way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like it opens your eyes, that kind of experience. So it's like, it's something like that, right? It causes like, it shifts, it basically throws all of your core assumptions into question so that you are opening your eyes again and trying to reset things and trying to figure stuff out. You're in like hyper learning mode. You're forced into hyper learning mode, I think, maybe. And that's why having an intention, you're right. Like having an intention seems like it would be a really important part of that, because if you're going to be thrust into hyper learning mode, you have to do that with like the right kind of intention so that you're learning in sort of directionally the right ways, I guess. Yeah.
This is one of my favorite quotes from the Sanskrit professor, Douglas Brooks. Was at Rochester. And he said, well, he was describing that the word sin, S-I-N, from ancient Hebrew literally translates to, it was an archery term that meant to miss the mark.
Oh
And-
yeah, I think I
right?
read that recently as well. Yeah.
And you'd have a spotter, like a sniper has a spotter that's like looking down on the hill, and they would shout out sin, 45 cubits to the west or something, so that the archer could then aim and be a little more accurate, right? Based on the feedback loop of how far off you were from hitting the mark, right?
Right.
And Douglas said, in terms of like spirituality, intentionality as a spiritual practice, he said, and in with the original sin of Judeo-Christianity, there's a concept of like when you've done something wrong, like you were talking earlier about confessionals, like saying, I did this thing and I feel bad about it, so I'm going to pay penance for it. I'm going to do work to make up for it. Mm-hmm. And he said the true original core, like root level meaning was, I was trying to hit, I was aiming, I had an intention to accomplish something and I fell short.
Yeah.
And what I want to know, like the magic, like the sort of beautiful feedback loop shift is, how far off were you? So was sin 45 cubits south and west, So then then the assumption is you'll adjust your aim.
You'll correct and recalibrate. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what you want to know is what the sin metric is, And when you sort of sneak around the back door of like Judeo-Christian concept of like original sin or sin, and you think like it's what you want to know is you want to make a lot of mistakes so that you can hyper correct and get really back on track. And that implies that you do have a target, a thing you're trying to do with intention. And I think when you talk about like, for instance, just recreationally using LSD or any kind of hallucinogen, if it's just to blow off steam and you have no goal of opening.
Or if you have sinister intentions.
If you have sinister intentions, I've never even occurred to me that someone would take it.
Well, so like I feel like you could have implicitly sinister intentions where maybe then they're not your explicitly stated intention, but like, so this made me think of the idea of having sort of implicit intentions because, we don't always know ourselves. And when you're about to do psychedelics and you're kind of stating your intention, you haven't done it yet, right? So your heart isn't open. You're not in that kind of peeled away state. You're just yourself. You're just your normal kind of in the world, in this flawed world kind of self in that moment when you're stating your intention. It very well might not be the intention that's sort of authentic and true, that you're really, the thing you're really thinking. And we fool ourselves a lot. So it's not even that you're being intentionally deceptive, but like you could think that your intention is something different than what it really is, right? Because we fool ourselves maybe more than we fool other people. So I was thinking about, there was a woman, I listened to a podcast a while back, and she was talking about, she was a developmental psychologist of some sort, and she was talking about how she studied how we enter these states of hyperdevelopment in our life, different inflection points as we develop as kids, especially, right? You hit a specific moment where you typically learn to walk, or you typically start learning to talk, right? Mm-hmm. And then she talks about how there's sort of a few of these that she's identified that happen during your life where you are primed, and there's certain external things that can open you to like a hyper learning kind of state of development. And then she was curious about that, like what are things that might open that hyper learning state so that you could develop some new knowledge really fast, or new ideas really fast, or new skills really fast, or whatever. And so she studied a bunch of different psychedelics, and she found that MDMA and other psychedelics as well are extremely powerful, and in the right conditions can produce one of these hyper learning kind of states that are very similar to what you experience as an infant or as a toddler or whatever, and teenager, certain things, right? And
like create a window of neuroplasticity where you're freshly ready to receive change and absorb. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're the kind of person who's just your general life is about competitiveness and winning and, crushing the competition and dominating people and dominating your employees or whatever, and you do psychedelics, to open your heart and mind or whatever, I think that like if your whole life has been directionally sort of in this one kind of focus, like about winning in a certain way, for example, that it may just increase that it may open a hyper learning kind of mode for you, but it's still sort of directionally about winning and dominating and whatever. So like the technology itself may just enhance what you're already kind of what your intentions already are, I guess.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? I found that quote from Elon Musk. So he says, "The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy."
Whoa.
And then the Hannah Arendt quote that I've seen it juxtaposed with is, "The death of human empathy is one of the earliest and most telling signs of a culture about to fall into barbarism."
And barbarism is like descent into mayhem, darkness, the rule of warlords, and
Everyone against everyone. That
everyone
kind of
against
thing.
everyone.
Yeah.
I've also heard, and I think it's Gorillas in the Mist. What's her? Jane Goodall. I think she has that quote about the earliest. Like we sort of label like what is a civilization? When did civilization begin? I think that's what it was. And she said, I've always looked at this instance where we found in a cave someone who had a femur bone break that was, like you could tell that they had healed from it and that they had lived many years afterwards. And that what would have been required then would be that people would come and care for you while you were incapacitated. And bring you food and water until you could get up and walk and participate in the culture. And that was the sort of signal of civilization arriving, which requires empathy and
it's kind of interesting. It's like there's those questions that go back to like Hobbes versus Rousseau and what is the true nature of man, right? Like Hobbes talked about, man is fundamentally sort of barbaric, right? That life without laws and civil society is brutal, short, whatever his quote was, right? And then Rousseau's sort of concept of the nature of man was that humans are fundamentally sort of gentle, cooperative creatures, and that laws kind of more often than not are constraints on our nature, right? Our sort of fundamentally good nature. It's a super interesting question because you do look at things like what you described, and it takes a certain kind of benevolence or goodness or goodwill or whatever to decide, hey, this person who can no longer contribute to our village or household or whatever because of their broken leg, like we still value this person even though they're not contributing, and it's going to require us to work to sort of, there's an opportunity cost. We're going to have to take care of this person so that they survive, even though they're of no value right now, right? Like that kind of leans more toward the Rousseau side. Like people are, and Rebecca Solnit, the essayist, she's written, I forget her book, but she wrote a book about that, basically about like all these examples of people in disasters. For example, you see people helping each other through disasters, the wildfires in California recently, right? Like the hurricanes that hit North Carolina last year. There's tons of examples of people just like rising to that occasion and helping their fellow man. Whereas you see zombie movies and stuff, it's always dog eat dog, like everybody's out.
Yeah.
So it is interesting to wonder like what are people really like? Is that civilization, or is that something more in our nature? Like, is it fundamentally in our nature to help each other or not? It's an interesting question. Because then on the flip side, you see, we've talked about this before on the podcast, you see examples of neighbors turning against neighbors and mob violence and crazy shit, like in countries where they're, sectarian violence, people are just killing people on the street that they used to be friendly with and stuff like that, right? Like, that's the complete opposite. So I don't know. It's very interesting to wonder about like what's the the natural state of things.
A few years ago, I read about this study. I've always been interested in archaeology, and especially like the missing link, like Lucy, and like how we became quote unquote humans, or when and how. And this group of archaeologists they were looking at the Angola coast, like western edge of southern Africa. And the theory was that we had leapfrogged the Neanderthal as a Homo sapien race. We had leapfrogged them in this place, and then from here had spread out across the world, like, so come up through Africa and out through the Middle East and into Europe, et cetera. And one of the theses or hypotheses was the way that we leapfrogged the Neanderthal was two technologies: projectile weaponry and hyper collaboration. And that, like, projectile weaponry was defined as anything that would make throwing an object faster or harder than you could do with just your hand and arm. So like adding like a string,
like a sling,
to it, sling, or even a spear, because it has mass and you can, once you get it moving, so a spear would be. And then the hyper collaboration, he did tests. He had all of his grad students, and they were gathering mussels in the sort of shoreline. And they could gather 3,000 calories per hour. And his theory was, if you had a group guarding you, like on the top of the dunes, and you could just focus on gathering the mussels, you could gather enough in 2 hours for, like, a group could gather it for the whole tribe, and then you could focus on other things, and division of labor could rise up, and you'd have
specialization, all that.
Specialization, yeah. So this is his theory, and it occurred to me, and this was, when I read it, it was like, I guess back in 2020, like before, when really, like, the height of, like, school shootings, and then the NRA pushing for more guns. And I thought, it's funny that, like, the dark sides of hyper collaboration is xenophobia. And then, of course, the dark side of projectile weaponry is, like, the NRA refusing to allow, lobbying for no gun control. Like, to me, those are, like, sort of, we're still wrestling with those technologies today, and it's like 110,000 years later or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything seems to have like those two sides, right? The light and the dark side.
Right.
And yeah, it's interesting.
What do you think about, so this is, we've talked a lot about Swedenborgian philosophy and theology and stuff. What do you think about that idea of divine providence and the maintenance of the dark and the light, like almost a yin-yang balance on the planet? Because what you just described was that, like, it may seem at times that the darkness certainly, like, during the Dark Ages, or when, like, Attila the Hun took over Europe, like, there's places where it seems like it's imbalanced, and it does feel like the bad guys are winning, is how it feels to me today, But it does feel like there's, like, almost like a waveform where it kind of oscillates back and forth between the bad guys are winning, then the good guys are winning, and it kind of.
I think it's sort of cyclical, and maybe the part of me thinks about that macro, micro levels that that I talked about before when we were talking, is that, the bad guys are winning in a certain level, right? Like, they are in the White House now and in the Supreme Court, in Congress, whatever. Like, they're in power in certain ways, but and they're able to assert their evil will in certain ways. But I don't know, does that mean they're winning? There are a lot of ways they're not winning, kind of at the micro level, and maybe, I guess it remains to be seen. Are they going to crush culture in a way? Like, the culture still exists, there's when you look at, people are still making songs and movies and art and writing books, and all that stuff still exists, from good-hearted, beautiful-hearted people. Like, I don't know what winning means, I guess. So part of me thinks, like, some of that is just an illusion. Like, they have taken some ground, and then that ground could be taken away tomorrow. And to what extent is that, quote unquote, winning? I don't know. So that's one thing, one way I look at it. But then there's sort of the divine providence thing that you're talking about, like, is this sort of long arc of the universe bends towards justice or whatever, right? Like, that Martin Luther King idea, that's kind of what you're talking about with that's how I kind of understood what I was taught about divine providence, is there's this idea that God is sort of directing the long arc of the universe towards salvation, but you might not see that in any given snapshot of the world, right?
Yeah, it's funny because as a child learning about divine providence, I remember And my parents were very, very anti what they called, our community. There was sort of a level of fundamentalism where people would literally like let their kids stand up in the front seat without a seatbelt, and they'd be like, "The Lord's got this. Like, if it's meant to happen, you know what I mean?"
Yeah, you see that definitely in the fundamental evangelical. Like, dude, there's a COVID vaccine. Like, God helped scientists make a vaccine to save you from this pandemic, right? Like,
it's the
God's
joke
not
about
going to just magically heal you. Like, he created. If you believe in God, then he created the people and gave them the minds to develop the solution, right? Like, it's like the
story
helicopter
of the
coming by with the flood,
the
right?
flood, and the guy's on the roof. He's like, "God's going to save me," and then
God's going to
the
save me.
sheriff
Like,
in a
God
boat
sent the
and
fucking helicopter, dude.
like, what were you thinking, man? I sent you the helicopter. Yeah, that's a really funny one. But yeah, so there was that. I grew up with sort of under the umbrella of that from my parents.
Yeah.
But then
I remember some of those same people growing up that thought that way. That
they heard it and they just absorbed it and acted upon it that way. So, but then what used to make me, I would sort of toss and turn before I went to bed, was reading about the idea that the purpose of divine providence was to maintain free will for humans at all times, so that you weren't forced to choose to be good.
I remember learning that free will was sort of an important ingredient of divine providence, but not the purpose of it. Like that God was sort of the divine providence. Like what that referred to was God was sort of steering things towards good, but we needed to be making our own decisions in that context. But that He was putting things in front of us that would, incrementally lead all of us towards good, or not all of us, but incrementally leads humanity towards good. So He was so that was the way of explaining challenges and bad things, right? Like, and obstacles. It was like, well, we need to have free will, but the obstacles that that like are put in front of you are all sort of like on a macro scale, they're designed to move things towards salvation, right? That's not, people are going to fall through the cracks. People are going to make bad choices because of their free will. That's part of the mix, but that's not the purpose of things. That's kind of how I thought of it. Yeah.
I certainly, used to kind of feel like because the term that would pop up in the divine providence conversation was permissions. Like why would the Lord permit something so horrible? Mm-hmm. And then they said because of divine providence. Like that was that was the answer. Like it's all part of. It's sort of like a trying to be a slightly more sophisticated version of the answer that God is mysterious. God works in mysterious ways, right? It's basically that, but trying to be a little more sophisticated about how you say that. That's what that is. I think growing up with that background and that sort of foundation, and then kind of going on a journey through various Eastern philosophies, one of the things that I felt like is a parallel kind of you could map it across. So Shiva Shakti Tantra, which is like Kashmiri Shaivist Tantra from roots that are 5,000 years old. Mm-hmm. And the theory in Shiva Shakti Tantra is you have this omnipotent being that is everything. Like imagine every electron in the universe and the fabric of dark matter is Shiva. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that the omnipotent everything person consciousness doesn't know is what it feels like to be finite, mortal, and alone.
Interesting. And
then their theory that he, Shiva, the male figure, projects himself almost like, I think of like one of those Play-Doh machines when you put the Play-Doh in and push and it comes out as a shape. Yeah. Pushes himself into the universe and creates the perceptible physical universe, which is us and planets and atoms. And that's considered the female form Shakti. And it like Mother Earth, but we represent that. And we're really agents who really can do no wrong because our sole purpose in this construct is to report back to the omnipotent consciousness what it feels like to be finite, mortal, and alone. And you can't mess it up because all you have to do is be you.
Right. You just have to exist. Yeah.
You have to exist and suffer and then report back. And you're doing it all the time by just being conscious of yourself. And it's a beautiful idea in a way. I mean,
it is. And it makes me think of like so I guess I can sort of attach that also to the idea that we are all one, right? Like that there is no separateness. So that's not a Hindu concept. That it's more of a Buddhist concept, right? And but in that context, like all of us are sort of like nodes. We're like little nerve endings on this large thing, right? Like we aren't separate. We're part of the large thing, but we're like nerve endings, kind of like receiving signals to send to the central kind of to everyone else. Right?
Like an octopus has its
like an octopus,
distributed across 2,000 nodes, and its brain is those nodes.
We are that. Yeah, but we're all part of the octopus. It's interesting. Yeah,
it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I know. The other thing it made me think of too, I guess. So this idea when we're talking about divine providence, like it would often come up, as you say, in questions around like why would God permit that kind of suffering, like. And often, like the hardest questions are innocent people suffering, right? Like children. You know, why would, if there's a God, why would God permit children, who've done nothing to go through that kind of suffering? And you point to these examples or those examples, right? And I think that God works in mysterious ways, and any more sophisticated version of that is a pretty weak sauce answer, right? But the thing I was thinking about that answer more recently, and I was kind of taking another look at it. And I guess to your point about not knowing what it means to be finite, like I don't believe in God, but as I started to think about that answer, I thought, you know what? Actually, if you were God, and if you understood eternity, if you existed in eternity, even if you were a human and you lived forever, like if you believe in heaven or whatever, and you believe in the eternal soul, if you believe in eternity, in other words, then no amount of human suffering going on for any, years and years of human suffering, none of that is significant at all against the backdrop of eternity, right? Like, so God could allow any amount of suffering to happen in any one person's life, and that would recede to zero against the idea of eternity.
Right. Yeah, so like it's a rounding error.
So just mathematically, like that isn't any suffering. So I just, even though I still don't, that didn't make me believe in God or anything. I just thought, like, actually, that seems to be a pretty easy way around that question. Like eternity is infinity, and there's no amount of suffering, no number of years that equates to anything when you compare it to infinity.
Yeah. It makes me think of I would teach a yoga class where I would do the constant and the variant. So I would say, and I would relate to, like, you're about to take, this triangle pose that everyone recognizes, and there's certain things structurally, ergonomically that you need to maintain the same, like lock your knees so your knees don't bend, and then there's things that you need to allow to change as you go deeper into the twist. You have to unlock. We get up in the morning, we look in the mirror, and we say, oh, there's Milo. And to us, we're the constant. But to the stardust that came before us, that we're made of, and the stardust that will come after us, we're the variant. Like, for this very short period of time, we assembled into this magnificent organic being that has consciousness, and then it's gone. And it's only like, as you say, like for 78 years on average, it's such a tiny blip on the continuum of that energy, which is
not just tiny, but literally mathematically non-existent.
Yeah, non-existent. And so we to have that mind shift where you're like, wow, in that context, I'm the variant. Like I'm the weird blip that just came out of nowhere and then it's going to be gone. But we always look at ourselves and think like, it's me. It's always me. I'm experiencing suffering. I'm the only one because it's me and I'm the constant here. But actually, you're kind of just the variant, like one of the variants.
Yeah.
One of the little things that might have happened or could happen or did happen,
That's a perfect note to end on, I think.
I like it. Yeah, thanks, man. Let's, do you want to do any first world problems?
Yeah, I have one. My Kindle. So do you have a Kindle?
Somewhere. I haven't turned it on.
I don't know. I like reading, especially nonfiction on my Kindle, where I can highlight things and the notes are all saved. Very cool. So that's the opposite of a first world problem. That's like the feature that makes the Kindle worth it for me. But the thing I don't like, the power button for the Kindle is on the bottom of the Kindle. So if you try to rest the Kindle on a surface in front of you to read, you always turn it off by accident. If I hold it like gravity, like I hold it from underneath, like a book, my pinky going across the bottom of it or whatever, I always turn it off by accident. So I'm constantly accidentally turning the Kindle off, and then I have to turn it back on again.
That's pretty annoying.
So that's my annoying. Like you could put the power button on any other side of it, and it would be perfectly fine. But putting it on the bottom causes me to turn it off all the time. I Googled it just to see, like, do people complain about that? Yeah, lots of people complain about that. But
I'm probably gonna sort of re-up this one, like in Reddit, like re-up it because you said about the Kindle button.
Yeah.
But like this Johnny Ive thing right here.
Oh yeah.
Which is the charging port for the Magic Mouse.
Oh yeah.
Which has been around for years, like I don't know, 7-10 years, something.
Right.
And yet people say like, wow, you could just put it here and then you could use it while you're charging.
Yeah.
Where it's there.
Yeah.
Now, was that on
charging?
Is the question, I guess the question at this point is, when you re-up it was that intentional? And if it wasn't intentional, wouldn't at some point in like a performance review, someone who was in charge of like the, product design would be like, hey, let's revisit where that fucking charging port is. You know what I mean?
Well,
like,
it's probably not just the location. It probably can't charge. I mean, it can't be in use while it's charging, even for other reasons. Like even if it was, so they would probably have to change like the actual,
like motherboard would have to have some more.
It would have to be changed
stuff.
such, in its internal guts so that you could, it could be active while it was plugged in.
Like it would need 2 batteries and then one's charging the other.
I only thought of that because I have these video game controllers for the Nintendo Switch, right?
Yeah.
And they are wireless, and they have a USB-C charging cable, right? So when they run out of juice, you plug them in, and you would think you could use them plugged in, but you can't actually use it as a controller while it's plugged in. It can only charge while it's plugged in, even though you can still hold it. There's no physical reason why you couldn't use it. It's literally just it goes into charging mode rather than controller mode at that point.
So I'm just going to go with, during my re-up of that, I'm going to go with that. That's why it was designed that way, and it wasn't just.
I mean, I would still identify that as a first world problem. That's a dumb. It should be usable while it's plugged in, regardless of whether it's physically usable or electronically usable.
Right.
I'm going to still agree with you that it's a first world problem, but I bet it goes beyond just the physical placement of the thing.
I have to add on another one. So I have these, noise canceling headphones, like the Bose became such a big deal.
Yeah.
And then I bought these Sony ones, which was really funny because on the review I read years ago when I bought it, it said, it's as if the Sony engineers were sick of losing to Bose, and they locked themselves in the laboratory for 2 years and came out with these headphones that just fucking kick Bose in the ass. Like they're just, everything's great about them.
I love my Sony headphones, yeah.
One thing that's crazy is when they run out of battery, they still work. They don't do the noise canceling, but you can still listen to them.
Yeah.
Bose, you can't.
Yeah.
Is that a patent problem? Like, why can't that? Doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
That should be a persistent first world problem until Bose changes it. Unless they can't because it's patented and they can't go there. It's weird, right?
Yeah, like I'm using these Sonys. They're powered off right now because I have them the cord.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean,
you
it's
can
crazy,
use them
right?
multiple ways. Yeah.
But I've been on a flight where my Bose, the battery ran out, and I just was like, "Why?"
You're done with your headphones at that point. It's pretty dumb.
What the hell?
It also doesn't give you any warning. Like,
Yeah.
if that's the limitation, then there should be like a tone that goes, "You have 30 more minutes of battery life." Like not 1 minute or 2 minutes, but like give you a reasonable warning. Like, "Oh shoot, okay, well I'll conserve it then," or whatever.
Right.
Or I won't start this movie. I'll just listen to this quick podcast. Right. Like there's.
Right. Yeah.
You would make decisions based on knowing that you had 30 minutes left.
The power of knowing. It's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Satellite Haiku, always awesome to talk to you.
All right, brother.
Take care.
Take care.
Have a good one. Bye.
Satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.